I didn't mean that that was mutually exclusive in any way. Maybe mutually reinforcing. Claude is a sociologist. In fact, a research professor of sociology at the Centre National de la Recherche Scientifique, the CNRS in Paris, and now in Jerusalem, a member of the Centre de Recherche Français à Jérusalem. Claude has taught all over the world, at Harvard University, at the Institute of Advanced Studies in Princeton, at Stanford, at UC San Diego, at Northwestern. He was the director of the Institute for Advanced Study in the Social Sciences in Paris, France. He's conducted research in the fields of social studies of science and technology, and also social, political, and cultural theory. He's the author of a number of works, among them The Capitalists of Science, Investigations on Silicon Valley and NASA Demonstrators. More recently, Logical Skills, Socio-Historical Perspectives, and also Weaving Self-Evidence, A Sociology of Logic. Tonight, Claude is going to be talking about one of his two most recent books, The Demonstration Society, which he very generously gifted me, and I read with great interest. It's really a super interesting book. I'm not the only one who thinks that it's really interesting. Here's Michel Lamont of Harvard. Rosental has a gift for making us see the world differently, as he provides the vocabulary needed to study crucial but often invisible and understudied aspects of reality. The Demonstration Society is a tour de force. And one more appreciation from Steve Chapin. This is a rich and resonant exploration of the complex relationships between performing demonstrations, scientific, technological, cultural, political, and the realities of what is demonstrated. Rosental puts demonstration center stage in the theaters of late modernity. So first of all, go out and buy the book and read it. But second of all, we're all lucky to have Claude with us here, who can provide an introduction to us and whet our appetite, I'm sure. So Claude, once again, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Oren, and everybody, Noah, and סליחה, אבל אני מדבר קצת עברית, אבל אנגלית זה בסדר. So I will try to at least use English. And thank you so much for having me. Toda rabba. And I'm very happy to present the Demonstration Society that came out just very, very recently. This is a book that focuses on what is commonly called public demonstrations. And these social practices are often perceived as isolated and anecdotal. But the book shows that public demonstrations are, on the contrary, omnipresent in social life, and that their stakes are considerable. So these stakes are at the same time scientific, technological, social, political, and economic. So the book also shows in what ways we live today, as in the past, in a demonstration society. To this end, I highlight how a large set of actors proceed to conceive, prepare, and carry out public demonstrations. And I also investigate, as Steve Chapin said, the complex topics, namely how demonstrations are perceived by audiences. So during my presentation, I will try to explain why public demonstrations represent a major issue for the social sciences and especially for the STS field. So let me try to move to share my screen if I'm allowed to do this. Okay, let's see if it works. So do you see my screen now?
Yes, yes, we do.
Okay, wonderful. So I'll move to the diaporama. Okay. So demonstrators from time to time they appear and then they disappear. They become invisible. So I will be a bit invisible for the moment. Try to be a good demonstrator. First, I would like to tell you what I mean by public demonstration, which is might seem a bit strange to you, a strange word. I will use both words and images for this. And I will quickly talk about the data on which my analysis is based. I will mention some of my main results. Then I will be more specific. I will focus on one of the cases I study in the book. I will present how the European Commission uses various forms of public demonstrations to manage science and technology. So during our discussion, I will be, of course, happy to mention other results. But first, what does demonstration refer to? So demonstration comes from the Latin demonstratio. Please forgive my Latin accent. And it has several meanings according to the context in which it is used. So I ask you to pay attention to these ideal types I'm about to mention, because I will give you a quiz afterward on this. Demonstration is commonly used to describe, one, a proof, for example, in the sciences, two, an action showing something in order to explain, interest, or impress. For example, it might be showing how a device works, displaying an athletic, artistic, or technological skill, shifting the position of armed forces in order to intimidate or deceive an adversary. So this is meaning two. Meaning three, that we'll find in most dictionaries, like the previous two ones. It might refer to the manifestation of an inclination, an intention, or an emotion. And since the mid-19th century, the word has taken on a supplementary meaning as a public gathering, rally, or march intended to protest or express an opinion on a political issue. So this is meaning four. So let me show you 10 pictures that offer a good illustration of these practices. So here is a quiz. Please think about the meaning each picture corresponds to. So here is US Secretary of State Colin Powell demonstrating the presence of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq at the United Nations headquarters in 2003. So I guess you would associate this more with a public proof, and that refer more to meaning one. Here is the anatomy lesson of Dr. Nicolas Tulp by Rembrandt in 1632. And this, depending on what's going on exactly at a given moment, might refer, to demonstrating a theory and a physiological theory, and then refer first of all to meaning one. Here is a high-tech demo at Microsoft Tech Days in Paris in 2015. So I already spoiled, and of course I said the demo, so that would be more meaning two. Here is a demonstration of a small household appliance at the Paris Fair in 2014. And as it is a demo of a fouet universel, you would guess that meaning two is relevant here. a very strange practice. This is a demonstration of the running of the bulls in Beauvoisin, France in 2007, showing, the skills of the guardians here on the horse, on horses. So that would be more like meaning two. Here is a demonstration of hip hop on the Champs-Élysées in Paris in 2012. Once again, the ideal type would be more like the second one. Here is one of the famous Steve Jobs demos demonstrating the MacBook Air at the Macworld conference in 2008. So that would be more like meaning two, of course. Now here is a demonstration of military might in North Korea in 2013. So once again, meaning two, and two more pictures. Here is a demonstration of faith during the Good Friday procession at Cordoba, Spain in 2014. So that would be more associated with the third meaning of the word demonstration. And at last, here is a picture from the scientists, so-called scientists on the march street demonstration in Paris in 2014. A demonstration, a street protest of scientists. So that would be more the last, more recent meaning given to demonstration since the 19th century and meaningful. So the picture I just presented show why public demonstrations shouldn't be simply associated with street protests. They also give you an idea of the scope of the research field I have attempted to explore, which is by itself somewhat unusual. So the question is, how did I proceed to analyze these various elements of the demonstration society, which is a term I use to cover at least all the phenomena I showed you. So first, I have relied on case studies that I've carried out over many years. I also relied on a fragmented literature documenting these practices on a large geographical and historical scale. And studying the available work on the topic led me to carry out fieldwork in areas that had thus far been little studied, if at all. It also led me to undertake new investigations into the most widely studied cases, whether to corroborate, nuance, or supplement the available results. This is the case, for example, of demonstrations at popular fairs or street protests, which have been quite well documented, whether in the contemporary period or in the past. So as a result, I observed the uses of public demonstration throughout the world. For example, high-tech demos in Silicon Valley, major street protests in France, demonstrations of research programs launched by the European Commission in Brussels, demonstrations of faith during religious processions, and even performances by skilled demonstrators at the popular Paris Fair, as I showed you. In the end, a first set of data relates to various types of public demonstration in the field of science and technology, both in the contemporary period and throughout history. Another set of inquiries, which partly overlaps the previous one, relates to demos carried out in a large number of spaces. And a third set of data concerns the organization and running of large street demonstrations. So it is easy to imagine that the analysis of this very large body of data implies the writing of several books. So this book represents a first volume, or a kind of general introduction, which will be followed by others. So let me try to present in a few sentences some of the main results that emerge from this research. And then I will try, as I said, to present a case study and try to be more specific. So by putting together the pieces of a vast puzzle, I only showed you 10 parts of this puzzle. I have attempted to bring to light the pervasiveness of public demonstrations in society, both in the contemporary period and throughout history. Public demonstrations represent total social facts in mass and mole sense of the word. Taken as a whole, the phenomena in question encompass all institutions. They are at once scientific, economic, political, and aesthetic in nature. They are of the cognitive, legal, and religious order. Public demonstrations are used in domestic as well as in professional life. They implicate all social classes. They are deployed in a large number of spaces where gathering and exchange takes place. Their preparation and running can mobilize numerous resources, give rise to significant tensions, and arouse passions. Although they may pass unnoticed, they appear to be essential factors in social life and the source of some of society's most intense moments. They involve the alliances, the material and symbolic possessions, and more generally, the future of individuals and collectives. They appear as a major type of interaction in its own right. The scope of the phenomena suggests that we are living today, as in the past, in a demonstration society. This society is marked by the existence of an imperative to demonstrate that is deployed on multiple scales and on many different bases. Social relations, economic and anthropological exchanges, and the life of societies appear to be strongly structured by these practices. The cases I've studied show that demonstrations are or have been abundantly used by central authorities, interest groups, organizations, and a multitude of individuals in efforts to lead the world, to use one of Tocqueville's expressions. They serve to prove, to convince, and to promote, but also to influence and to resist. They are mobilized to develop and sell products and build markets. They can be used for other purposes as well. I've sought to show how they can also serve as modes of entertainment, consumer goods, cultural products, commercial spectacles, ceremonial events, and forms of art. Public demonstrations are also at the origin of regimes that can be called democratic. I use demo-cratic, not democratic, but I call them demo-cratic, to the extent that they mobilize demonstrations as a way of managing public affairs. And they are the heart of the production, management, and promotion of science and technology. So I would like now to illustrate these last 2 points with a case study. Democracy, demo-cracy, and their use for to govern science and technology and promote them. This case study will allow me to present more specific results that are more directly related to STS issues. And for this purpose, I would like to present how the European Commission, as I said, uses public demonstrations to manage and promote its research programs. So if you are part of this, one of these ERC grants, I would like to give you a kind of socio-historical introduction to these programs. My arguments will be based on empirical investigations I conducted several years ago on the management of a European research program in the field of information technology. This program was called ACTS, which stands for Advanced Communications, Technology and Services. So here is an illustration of the main purpose of ACTS, which was to develop a high-speed communications network in Europe, along with multimedia services. Multimedia applications designed for the high-speed network included software for high-quality video conferences, and these pieces of software could actually be seen as some of the ancestors of Zoom, the application we are using today. Another purpose of ACS was to favor telework in Europe. ACS involved experiments of telework within major industrial firms and participating European institutions. ACS selected and funded more than 150 projects over a 5-year period. The program's overall budget was around 700 million euros, so that would be approximately today something like 3 billion shekels. Participants in the ACS program included researchers, engineers, and executives from numerous European countries. Many of them were working for telecommunication and computing firms. ACS officials had to demonstrate the achievements of the program in a specific context. They faced insistent questions, conflicting demands, and criticisms from European Parliament members and industrial lobbies. Lobbying organizations representing different industries sought favorable treatment. ACS officials in this context had to show that they took into account many economic and political interests into consideration and that they made impartial and relevant arbitrations. They also had to show that their use of public money led to concrete and, quote, valuable results. They used several devices for such purposes. One was the production of summary reports displaying proper statistics on the program using lists, tables, charts, and figures. These reports were distributed in Brussels and beyond. Another device was the running of public demonstration of technology by ACS participants. Both devices were demonstrations that were more particularly intended for economic and political authorities. This included company managers and national and European elected officials. So let me now focus on the content of ACS statistics before I turn to public demonstration of technology. So an important set of statistics on ACS programs bore on the distribution of European public money to all kinds of actors. They demonstrated ACS officials' concern for producing fair arbitration and for not excluding anyone. Figures showed that ACS was subsidizing all European countries and all kinds of industrial activities, like here, for instance. This is one of the very simple figures that were produced by the program. The ways research activities were quantified also helped portray ACS participants as particularly active and productive. Figures bore on the number of scientific papers, contribution to standards, patents, and experiments produced by the program. Statistics describe the types of technological applications being developed, as well as the many different types of tests conducted on the experimental network. Impressive figures were displayed. For example, one intermediary report referred to 1,300 papers that had been published by them and to 345 contributions to standards reported by 58 projects alone. Another report evoked twice as many public demonstrations of technology performed by ACS projects as articles published in referred journals. Quantifying and summing up ACS participants' activities this way resulted in portraying them as comparable and cumulative. This way of counting omitted competition between participants, as well as heterogeneous, non-cumulative, and antagonistic work. ACS activities were thereby depicted as homogeneous and converging toward European competitiveness and not as partially countering one another. They were shown as pure sums versus partial subtractions. The peculiar figures produced on research activities also help emphasize the fact that no time and public money was lost by the participants. For example, in an ACS report, a table was commented this way. So you have here an example of of pure technocracy, the statistical project, and this table was commented this way: the total man-months in the above table amounts to some 22,682 plus man-months of effort. Thus, the picture given of ACT's participants in the report could be compared to Tocqueville's portrait of scientists' condition in democratic societies. I quote him in Democracy in America, chapter 10, "Men who live in democratic communities not only seldom indulge in meditation, but they naturally entertain very little esteem for it. A democratic state of society and democratic institutions keep the greater part of men in constant activity, including those who cultivate the sciences." So this is not a description of capitalism, but really of democratic society. So you see the statistics on the program had several advantages for ACT's officials. They highlighted the fact that ACT's officials monitored the results of their program on a periodical basis and in a professional way, and that they were transparent about them. Numbers were the external signs of serious, systematic, and objective monitoring. Besides, these statistics serve as a reservoir of answers to criticisms. When necessary, officials could mobilize some favorable figures in the framework of discussions or public answers and refer to existing reports. In other words, figures and statistics were available and could be used to legitimize ACT's actions. Statistics had other advantages. Contrary to masses of technical documents and scientific papers produced by ACT's participants, they were compact and could be easily circulated. Comparatively, they were also more comprehensible to administrative officers, industrialists, and political authorities. Table charts and calculation were quite basic and familiar to them. Overall, statistics possessed many assets to convince various authorities that the ACT's program was productive and useful and was managed in a fair way. But these statistics had also some limits. They had to be read, while the targeted audiences often appear to prefer moving pictures to text and personal interaction to solitary reading. By comparisons, statistics were perceived as not very entertaining nor good at capturing attention and generating enthusiasm. Thus, the production of statistics was accompanied by other actions. ACT's officials relied on other devices to demonstrate the virtues of the program. Electronic databases were built to display well-prepared abstracts and attractive images of ACT's projects on the internet, like here, for instance. Journalists were hired to present exciting results in European publications. Success stories of ACT's projects were also produced and conveyed via different means of communication, including CD-ROMs. For instance, a CD-ROM entitled ACT's Multimedia Success Stories contained short texts accompanied by images and videos to make the reader's task easier and more attractive. But by far the most important means of demonstrating the achievements of the program consisting of running demos. ACT's demos involve showing the functionality and usefulness of multimedia application and of high-speed exchanges of information. For example, some demos showed how to view, manipulate, and transmit medical image data on the high-speed network, like here, for instance. Other demos showed how to practice telework via high-quality video conferencing, like here. These demos gather executives and managers of telecommunication, computing firms, engineers, researchers, EC senior officials, representatives of lobbying organizations, journalists, and politicians. Organizing a teleconference involving economic actors and political authorities was a targeted and powerful way for ACT's officials to demonstrate the project results to actors concerned with public spending. Because of the demos, these actors were not forced to base their opinions on ACT's results on expert advice alone or on reports that challenge their reading skills, not even on series of dry figures. Instead, ACT's demos provided moving pictures and personal interaction. The limited time needed to attend demos offered a unique opportunity for busy officials to apprehend, or at least gain the feeling of apprehending, submitted projects. Altogether, ACT's demonstrations of feasibility functions like demonstrations of strength, aiming at exhibiting the power and efficiency of the program. But public demonstrations played other roles that statistics didn't play. ACT's participants appropriated the running of demos for their own purposes. Demos help participants maintain confidence in the work in progress. They also enable them to generate interest in their project among newly approached or unknown actors and obtain new contracts or build new partnerships. Performing demos help to define and refine the content of ACT's project in a dialectical manner. Engineers and researchers took seriously the criticisms and suggestions expressed by audiences during demos. As such, demos played a role in influencing the orientation and reorientation of projects. Sometimes, demos were even used as tools for project management when demonstrators observed audiences' reactions in a systematic way and collected ideas in order to define the content of their research step by step. Demos contributed also to the coordination of ACT's participants. To benefit from EC funding, the latter had to display collaborative work with European partners. Even if they had competing approaches and interests, preparing common demos represented a common denominator. But demos were also marked by a concern to hide some results, as European telecommunication and computing firms were competing with one another. Representatives of these firms were often asked by their higher-ups to keep certain aspects of their work secret during their meetings in Brussels. They arrived in Belgium with sometimes imprecise understandings of what could be said and shown, and what should be hidden behind technological black boxes. Demonstrators negotiated these issues during demo interactions according to how the demonstrations themselves went and the kinds of links that the demonstrators had built in the past or wanted to build in the future with their interlocutors. A gain of information was generally more rewarding for the demonstrators than a well-kept secret, especially as it was often difficult to track down information leaks. As a result, gifts and counter-gifts of information were very much at play. In the context of these dynamics of veiling and unveiling, demos operated more like exchange and secret management tools than proof procedure or persuasion instruments. Thus, demos played a central role in establishing and structuring relationships and competition between the multiple actors involved in the ACTS program. Demos structure the distribution of credit allocated to individuals, teams, and institutions, as well as to scientific and technological objects. But demos also structure the work of participants, especially when demos were used as mechanisms for observing audience reactions, tools for project management, and exchange apparatuses. Their impact was further enhanced by a range of peripheral tools, such as reports and CD-ROM exhibiting success stories. So, in other words, demos serve as a flagship among a fleet of demonstration devices. The use of demos, moreover, was amenable to many different strategies and agendas. The setting up and performance of ACT's demos met the complementary interests of several types of actors: scholars, engineers, firm executives, managers, politicians, journalists, administrative officers, and they constituted a rare opportunity for interaction, competition, and coordination of action. These actors would probably never have met without such a gathering device. Their exchanges were marked by recourse to spectacular demonstrations similar to those that brought together scholars, entrepreneurs, and representatives of political and religious power in France and in England in the 17th century. At a global level, demos serve as a bridge between science, technology, and society. So the process I've described illuminates why demonstration activities, I quote the expression, are at the heart of the chapter devoted to science and technology in the Lisbon Treaty, establishing a European constitution. In other words, to frame it in a more simple way, this process, this historical process, explains how demonstrations have become a constitutional topic for Europe and a way to make science and technology enter into a constitution. So the treaty states, the Union shall carry out the following activities, complementing the activities carried out in the member states. So it says implementation of research, technological development, and demonstration programs by promoting cooperation with and between undertakings, research centers, and universities. So the term, as you see, demonstration, if you read the European Constitution and you fall into this at the heart of the chapter of the devoted to science and technology in the European Constitution, you will now this term should make, I guess, more sense. These statements so illustrate that managing European R&D programs like ACTs and enacting effective public demonstration have become central components of the European political project. It also reveals how European politics and policies of science and technology have been defined in recent years in management terms, and how demonstration activities have become an essential tool of European public management. As surprising as it may seem, demonstration based on statistics and even more demos have become key tools in the construction of Europe itself as a political and scientific community. In short, the EC has developed what I call a demo-cracy, that is a regime that uses public demonstrations for the management of public affairs. I do not use this expression to mean that the EC has found an efficient way to convene mass audiences across European countries and convince them of the success of its action. Public demonstrations appear to be intended first and foremost for economic and political elites. Instead, I want to highlight the fact that the EC has mobilized public demonstrations based in particular on statistics and demos, but also on other forms of public demonstration, to administer public affairs in a systematic manner and to define and manage political projects on a quite large scale. So I'm going to end my presentation here to leave enough time for discussion. And thank you again thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Claude. Thank you very much. Super interesting. And anyone who would like to ask a question could either write in the chat or speak up. If there aren't any immediate questions, I'll start off with a question of my own, if that's all right. I wonder to what extent your research on the Demonstration Society draws on or is related to scholarship on the evolution of museums over the last, say, 300 years. In a way, it's an interesting counterpoint because, as you say, these demonstrations are aimed at elites, political and economic elites, whereas the idea of the museum is to open up to the public. So I wondered whether you have any thoughts about that.
I think Aaron, you are absolutely right. That the evolution of museum is really part of the history of the evolution of the uses, the nature and uses of public demonstrations. So to what extent did I conduct investigation on this? I will give you some ideas about the research I've done, and also ideas to reflect on this issue. Certainly, I have conducted research, for example, on indirect research, not first-hand data. I don't have first-hand data, but on what Barnum did in museums, in his private museums. He used a lot of demos. I talk about it a bit in the book. He conducted some, for instance, some demos to show, it was very subtle, not to show the existence of cadavers of sirens, but he tried to be very ambiguous about what he showed in his museums, for example, showing something and asking the people to decide whether or not these were indeed cadavers of sirens or not. And saying that, you know, that the experts, the scientific experts were not, were involved into controversies themselves, and that the public at large should decide by themselves, should be whether what would be the nature of what was exposed. This is an example, but you see the evolution of museums when you look at the science centers. They used far more demos instead of just exhibiting just artifacts and objects. You have a lot of uses of public demonstrations, live public demonstrations, or video public demonstrations. I went to a few workshops with people who are involved in building museums or just organizing, you know, exhibits in museums. And I conducted research on high-tech fairs, and they were very interesting in knowing what's going on, how you portray technology in high-tech fairs, because for them, you know, having booths and structuring, you know, the presentation of science and technology at high-tech fair was for them very interesting, because they were thinking, well, you know, in our current Museum of Science and Technology or in our science centers, should we, for example, use booths like in high-tech fairs, you know, where people would present their technologies, you know, making as if, you know, let's say Lavoisier's theories could be presented like in a way similar to Steve Jobs, trying to make a demo out of 19th century technologies, using a very enthusiastic tone to do this. So I think there is certainly, I haven't specifically conducted, I have some partial data, not first-hand data, but some data about the evolution, some bits about, the evolution of public demonstrations in museums. But I think that today, this is very relevant, and I see I'm part of a project with a museum of techniques in Paris, trying to make exhibits using demos. So I have the feeling that today, the museums of science and technology are ripe to produce a very quick evolution about how science and technology is portrayed, and especially by using demos.
I have a question, if I may. Thank you for that fascinating presentation and really thought-provoking. I was interested to see how jarred I was by seeing your examples, your slides and your examples, which are, the ones that you began with, which are so recent from 2015, 2016, how it felt a little bit like a different world, partly because of the pandemic, of course, but also because of the epistemic crisis that we have been experiencing since then. I realize that this is more a North American thing than European, but it's also something that has been felt around the world. And I wonder what happens to demonstration society in an age of epistemic crisis, when experts are doubted and when proof is doubted and when there are alternative facts. And so could you say a few words about our last several years?
Right. There are at the same time, I see some changes, and at the same time some long-term dynamics that overlap. For instance, depending on the scale of observation you have, if some observations that were made by Sheila Jasanoff are quite relevant, like when she looked at making an international comparisons about the epistemological conditions of proofs, saying basically our argument was to say that in the US you need really public demonstrations of technologies for technologies that the public is expecting to discuss them far more than in countries like England, where the trust in scientists doesn't work the same way, and where you can expect a delegation of trust to scientists, or in Germany that would be also different. So basically, despite the dramatic changes that occur during the pandemics, you have some long-term effects, kind of very long history that enter into play. But at the same time, something very specific, as you mentioned it, happened, which is the fact that, having doubt, and the fact that demos proliferate and can be very widely diffused on social networks, and that the algorithm used by social network favor complotist views, lack of trust to science, etc. So you can certainly argue that it's difficult to measure, because as a single scientist, of course, you can make working assumptions. But as a working assumption, I would definitely make the assumption that the demos have the way you use moving images the demos have, played a more and more central role and proliferated and be viewed more. Because the question is not only about the production, as I mentioned in the case study of, let us say, text, statistics, figures, moving images, demos, videos, but how they are viewed, how much they are viewed, and what way they are viewed. And what is very interesting about demos, because you could think, when you use a demo, there is a question of the issue of manipulation, because you have these images. Can you easily manipulate mass audiences with them? And the point is that what you observe, that demos are used not only by individuals, group of interest, central authorities, but also by organizations. And then you can observe demonstrative struggles. So what is very interesting is to look at how the public demonstration can be dismantled and reused, just twisted to make counterclaims. And then the question is more, it's not simply about, that there would be a simple mass effect of manipulation. And you are not like in a Habermas situation where demonstration is something, very big that is manipulated used by the states, where the individuals don't have any power against this. Here you see that the demos, the structure of power that occurs in a democracy is very specific. It gives a lot of power to the talented demonstrators. That's what I would very much like to argue. So in a situation like that, you observe a lot of demonstrative struggles, so demonstration, counter demonstrations, and then the game is not defined simply by the position of the actors that enter into the game. It also depends quite very much about the arenas themselves, how much visibility they can give to some public demonstration to other, whether there is an asymmetry, a symmetry, and whether the demonstrators themselves are talented. And then certainly the crisis of legitimacy of science can be very much inflicted by I would say the trials of strength that emerge from this distribution.
Thank you.
No,
we can't hear you.
Can I?
Anat Leibler? Yeah.
Thank you, Owen. Thank you, Claude. It was very interesting. I'm ill, I have the flu, and I was, I had to listen to your talk. So I have comment questions. I don't know how to put it, but I'll just express different thoughts that I have and had while I was listening to your talk. And also I have your book here. And so you cited Marcel Mauss as a motto of the book. And Marcel Mauss speaks about the moment, about interaction. And the first chapter is about the dramaturgic approach, which is about presentation, which is about negotiation and constructing impression about what is going on. So it is all about something that is temporal. And it is not something that is solid, something that you cannot put in your library, although statistics you can put in your library, right? So, this is something new, to treat statistics in that way. And it is also very different from, let's say, what Chandra Mukherjee did in her book on Versailles Gardens, how the gardens and the plan of the gardens, right, Versailles Gardens, were a total demonstration of the power of the king and power of the state, right? This is her argument. So it is interesting that you take. It's not that you take this argument, but that you have the same argument, but about something that is very liquidish. It's something that cannot be held and make stable. Nevertheless, demonstration gives a lot of power to the presenter, which is true. I mean, so it expresses something that is very poor in our, in our society. That something that is really depend on the moment, on something that is presented, showing off.
Recording in progress.
So yeah, if you can speak about the material order and materiality, or I wrote here demonstrative materiality or material demonstration versus something that is more temporal demonstration. And okay.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this is also a great question, because I agree with you. This is precisely the point. Since there is a crisis of reading prose or figures, then you said, you had a very interesting way of framing this, saying that statistics are stored in libraries, but they can also be brought back from time to time. The technology evangelists and many specialists in technological marketing have a lot to say about how they should do something that is live when they want to launch a product, and also to bring sometimes some figures, some pieces of statistics, and to make a balance about when they want to make a show. So this is exactly, I think this is a very important thing. The performances become very important when people don't want to read whether text or figures.
Right.
Figures still remain important because they can be used and they can be mobilized in specific settings, in specific ways. So, but the performance aspect is very important. And I think, a few years ago, for example, there were strong debates about the evaluation of science in continental Europe, but whether, social scientists should be, let's say, assessed by the number of publications, some quantitative figures, or whether they should be evaluated qualitatively. And the debates there were very strong debates, hot debates about this. And what the debates missed was the fact that what happened to many scientists in other disciplines, they are assessed by their performances. Like they are no longer, in certain cases, assessed, their scientific and technological activity is no longer assessed by their, not their text or the number of articles they wrote. They are assessed by the performance that they can make in front of a committee that is moving, arriving to the place. So by a performance. So I think this is one good example where if you want to understand what I call this demonstration society, you have to take into account precisely, the respective role of performances, of solid elements, that stay, that the material basis for them. Sometimes also there is a transmutation of the materials, like a performance can be recorded and used as a solid material again. And you have a transformation. The formats are not separate from one another. There is no tunnel in them. Very often, what I looked at is that the way the skilled demonstrators use one demonstration in a written form, and they extract some elements, they put it into a pitch or into a demo, they use it, and then, you know, there is this very fluid use of transformation, transformat, that is very much at play. And that's why it's very interesting not to, I think, to look at one specific format, but to look at all the formats together. This is what I call demonstrative arsenals. Because, you know, when you have groups, not only individuals, they build progressively demonstrative arsenals. Some of them do some demonstrative campaigns when they work together, like projects, and they have all these tools at their disposal that they build progressively. They exchange slides or pieces of text and performances, or they come together for the performances. And this is really collective work. And then the point is to look not only at the material support, but, you know, this dynamic, not only at the anatomy of demonstration, but at the physiology of them, at their physiology, how they are used, transformed, etc., etc.
Thank you.
Owen, can I ask a question?
Yeah, yes, of course, please.
Okay, thank you. I was wondering how does the innovation policy in the EU that leads towards societal challenges rather than economic growth, the innovation policy, the precautionary principle, Juncker's Commission, impact assessment, and I could just go on and on and on. The utilization of better tools for better policies, information, you know, all the structure of the EU Commission as is, and public consultations, identifying stakeholders. I mean, the whole setup affect the demonstrations basically.
Right, I see where I understand very well. It's a great question, because definitely there is a this is a very complex question. In fact, I mean, it is easy to formulate, but the answer is quite complex, because it depends on the scales you are considering to see the effects of these policies on demonstration. You can, it's quite easy to see local effects, like, because, you know, you are facing the groups that are involved in these processes. They learn. There is some kind of continuous learning. You know, demonstration is not like something that you learn as a course by itself at university. This is very much, in many cases, a lifelong learning process. So when people, you know, they are demonstrators, they are used to, you know, they are used to do their demonstration in front of certain arenas, and then they enter into this very strange game, you know, where they have to gather together with politicians. You know, sometimes they meet politicians for the first time, you know, the engineers, and then they have to switch to rewrite their repertoire, to change them. They observe the reactions of the audiences, and then they change them. Then they change the types of demonstration they use. For example, some are used to give, let's say, theoretical results and give very theoretical results, and they face people who want more lively demonstration, things that are that in front of audiences that think that they might understand what's going on. So they have to move from one type of demonstration to privilege one type of demonstration versus another. So in terms of forms of demonstration, you see very well how people, you know, are very iterative, how they develop a sense of demonstrative à propos, meaning by that they know what form of demonstration to use versus another, then it changes also the contents of the demonstration, because there is a very subtle and very important work about what should be, about learning about what should be said and not said in front of a given audiences. So, you know, they use their so-called intuition to say, well, I should say this and that, or not that, when they prepare the demonstration. They try to understand who are the audience. So you see the you know, an effect on the forms of demonstration, the content of demonstrations, of their specific demonstration, and overall, of course, on a larger scale, you know, this is not enough to transform the demonstrations themselves, but certainly these settings participate to the transformation by themselves, because, you know, but, you know, the people, they have to, when think about the, for example, in a program like that, the one I mentioned, they have to move, you know, they conduct, let's say, three demos per week. So in front of many different audiences. So the European setting is not enough to transform. It's hard to, you know, to define the very precise effect on a large scale of the European setting on demonstration itself. That's what I want to do.
Just tiny more question. What happens when like for technology is not understandable? Like for instance, it's very vague. Like for instance, AI. Okay, and then it goes from the commissions, for instance, to NGOs. It's been taken and it's being discussed at ITC and other places in big NGOs, because the people do not demonstrate because maybe the language is not very clear. AI is not very clear. It's not very easy to understand and to demonstrate. So basically, do they not demonstrate? Are there no demonstrations when the language is too difficult to comprehend?
Right. No, because there is always a way. The technologies are very good at that, because they can be used, you know, to hide secret and to show something versus just explaining things. You know, you show how things work, and it's incredible how when you have a very large scale of investigation, you realize that a lot of things can be demonstrated. Even a pair of socks. You go to the Paris Fair, you know, a fair where you demonstrate people. It's like a very large fair where a lot of cooking utensils are demonstrated, and you realize, you know, the wide diversity of things that can be demonstrated. A pair of socks, you would say, well, you would only use word logos to talk about that. But in fact, you can show, you know, manipulate the socks and show it works. So even if, you know, the technology behind the sock is very complex, using AI sensors, etc., they can be demonstrated. So that's why demos become very prominent tools in many social and historical spaces, because precisely, you know, because and that's what technology evangelists say, you don't, when you do a demo, you shouldn't explain who you are, explain how it works, and then show the functionalities of the products. But you should right away explain what the technology does. You know, this is very normative. And then perhaps say a few things about explaining how it works, saying a few things about who you are. But
storytelling, basically.
Right. And but it's more about showing than telling. You have many examples. And so it makes a difference. So that's why I argue that instead of talking about rhetoric, where you should master the way of using logos, but also playing on affects, on pathos, and also playing on your credibility, on ethos, or being benevolent in Aristotelian terms. It's more about techno-rhetoric in many places, where you have to show how to mix, to articulate language, emotions, credibility with technologies. And technology can be very low-tech, it can be very high-tech, but this is the point. And so to answer your question, no, there is no, you see this when you go in all the high-tech fairs, you see that how complex the technologies may be. The demonstrator who are very skilled know how to frame in simple terms, and even more than that, in simple performances and images and manipulation, how to frame their arguments.
Brilliant, thank you so much.
Claude, if I might ask a second question. Your book is called The Demonstration Society. It's not called, Homo Demos or something like that. But I was wondering, as you spoke, has there ever been a human culture which is not a demonstration society? Trying to think about it myself, I'm hard pressed to think of a human culture which is not a demonstration society, and therefore clearly we're interested in the modern manifestations, in the uniqueness of the modern manifestations, and that's why it's called the Demonstration Society. And for that purpose, it might be interesting to look at arenas where what is being demonstrated is actually, there's a strong historical continuity in what is being demonstrated. So for instance, in the boxing ring, and thinking of the long history of going back to the gladiators arena, the fastest growing sport in the world today is Ultimate Fighting Championship. And this is, as in classical Rome, this is a demonstration of strength, of bravery, of perseverance, and so forth. So I guess my question is, in those arenas where what is being demonstrated is actually, something which is quite basic to our human condition, and therefore, there are instances of it across history and across cultures. Can you point to some particular unique modern manifestations and features that can be easily sort of demonstrated, as it were?
Right. No, it's absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. This is a major question. You might not be satisfied by my answer, but I want to say that when I started to investigate this demonstration piece by piece. I started to look at demos in the Silicon Valleys. I was surprised how philosophy professors were, at Stanford were making, not only writing proofs of theorem, but when they were doing some philosophical logic, but also doing demos of first order logic. And then I saw that there were these demos, and I look at demos in popular settings, and progressively I saw, this object, being more and more pervasive. Then I look at I'm a reader of the history of science and technology, and the more I read, I felt confronted with, this pervasiveness. And exactly, I had the same question. So first, I was very much pushed by people to say, this is very simple. Modernity, if you look at the contemporary period, you will find more demos than in the past. But when I looked at in fact, all the results of my first-hand investigation at the literature, sociological literature, anthropology, and history, in fact, I thought this was wrong. At least I don't have the mean to say that quantitatively, first, there is a uniqueness in the contemporary period about the wide use of certain form of demonstration. I would be tempted to make some. I was tempted to make the assumption that demos were more and more present than in the past. But when you think about all the available literature, think about, let's say, ancient Greece, about the demonstration of iatrosophists who made some spectacular demonstration of how to heal people on ladders, so you have less data, on the Greek period, but the data you have comparatively, it's not relevant. It doesn't give an idea about whether some demos were more used than others, some forms of demonstration were more used than others, or demonstration were more present than by then than in another social historical space. So this is exactly the challenge. You name the challenge, Oren. If you are, I would be very much interested in trying to document that and to try to give solid answer to that. For the moment, my goal was to bring elements to document certain things that I could document, but such a big question like that, I'm not able to answer it. But I know that if we join forces, we might be able to go forward and to do that. So what I've did in the past year, in fact, I've used this as a way to interact with historians of science and technology, not to do cheap interdisciplinary research, but to say, well, okay, for example, look at the data you have, and in the contemporary period, I have a large set of data. It's easy to make a lot of ethnographic observation. Did what I observe is very specific, or in fact, if you look back at the archives, can you see it also? And this is very interesting because this is a way to, I saw some colleagues, with whom I built a very interesting dialogue, because, revisiting the archives and trying to see, was a way precisely to try to address this big issue. And I think, this is a point. What is trans-historical? What are the universal feature that we may observe across history and sociological spaces, and what are the things that are very specific? So by itself, it's a research program, and you will be very disappointed already.
Not at all. Thank you so much. We have time for probably one last question, if there is such a thing. And if not, I'd like to thank you. Everyone very much enjoyed your talk, and I did very much too. Thanks so much for visiting us. I'm sorry that it had to be on Zoom, but I hope we have the opportunity. You'll be here for some time still in Israel. So maybe we'll have an occasion to actually have you meet our people in person. So thank you so much. And just to say that next semester we have a full program in the colloquium, and there'll be more wonderful talks and visitors to meet. So good night to everyone. Noah, I don't know if you have any last words.
Just thank you very much, Claude. That was wonderful. And thank you to everyone. And we will see you soon, hopefully.
And thank you very much for your attention. I really appreciate it. I wanted to say that I'm based in Jerusalem, and I would be very happy to meet you whenever the situation permits it. And that would be with great pleasure, really. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Claude. Thank you so much.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.